start the presentation about valuation models, CityGML, LADM, IFC, BIM. Siham, please go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on the ongoing research project, which is about trying to develop a CityGML 3D property evaluation based on BIM as an input. So let's start here with a quick overview of the structure, starting with what motivated us to come up with the property evaluation approach. The first outlines of our proposed ADO model are presented here, and to conclude with rethinking and connecting the ADO valuation with the existing LADM-Valuation Information Model. So, 3D variable, as we know lately, have a substantial influence on the property value. So studies lately has been carried out to introduce 3D modeling techniques and 3D data sources in order to assess relevant variables to property valuation. Here we have example of sunlight exposure, view quality has been treated lately in the LADM-Valuation Information Model. So, in fact, building property units are exposed differently to environmental conditions, such as sunlight exposure and view quality, and each unit is made up of a variety of complex attributes. We have the indoor, daylight. The combination of the two structured indoor-outdoor variables in the early design phases is so relevant to support early decision-making for the real estate stakeholders, can be real estate valuer, contractor, or also taxation services. So these variables can come from the two potential urban city modeling and building modeling scale. For the outdoors, we have the SIM and based on the CityGML standards, and potentially for the BIM, we have the IFC and also the building information modeling simulation results based GBXML. BIM is offering a rich 3D model as in the conceptual design phase. We have the potential of the standardized and structured AFC open data model, the property costs as physical variables, and also the opportunities to assess and simulate some parameters potentially relevant to property valuation models. We have indoor daylight, indoor airflow as an example. CityGML as the basis of our approach, where our EDO is embedded, is having capabilities of extending and connecting to external references for specific application domain, potentially our valuation variables model. The other capacity, which is the capability of being interoperable and connecting it to external standards, basically in the scope of the last version, CityGML 3.0, so it's more interoperable to external standards. Here we come the potential use of the CityGML standard as our basis approach. For this purpose, let's see here, we have the proposed generic workflow addressing basically where our ADO valuation is embedded based on CityGML. And at the first stage of our model, we have needed existing ADOs classes and some classes that are going to be used from CityGML, and also for other variables, we're going to propose new ADO elements to complete our structure indoor-outdoor variables. When it comes to the elements, considering the data integration for indoors variables, these elements are going to be extracted from the BIM standards based AFC and BIM simulation results based potentially GBXML. Thanks to the mapping process into the ETL are going to be integrated and implemented in the 3D database. So potentially in the stage of implementation, the 3D city database. Just given attention, that we are in our research progress as the first specific stage, which is mentioned in blue. So it's the development of the ADE model. To come up or to come up to this level, we had to work on two different tasks, major tasks. So first, we have to select the significant 3D variables that are relevant to our approach, then to try to specify the technical requirements, parameters, based on indoor potentially BIM and outdoor CityGML. Here we are gonna present the selected mind map for what we had to select, basically relevant to our 3D variables property units based at the design phase. So we come up with three categories. We have the environmental, physical, and the indoor energy variables. However, for our approach, the locational attributes are constant for the property units variation during within the same building. So at this level, several variables definition are reviewed, taking consideration the definition relevant to property evaluation, and taking also in consideration the technical advances in 3D modeling and 3D data sources. So we have here also the technical requirements to identify the modeling of these variables. Taking the example of the sunlight exposure, we have different definitions. So the insulation, as it was integrated in the LADM-Valuation model, but we have other definitions that can be relevant to our approach property evaluation model. For the indoor, taking the example of the dilate, which is simulating the indoor direct dilate for the property units, we have here some parameters that are going to be relevant to simulate these variables. So this leads us to classify the selected variables based on the 3D data resources potentially used. We were talking about the BIM and the CityGML, but we have also other external resources. For example, for our view quality, we used the last achievement for the LADM-Valuation Information Model based on the technical requirements. Okay, so here we come up to the first outline results of our proposed model. Taking consideration, this is a version beta, so it's going to be so interesting to have your feedbacks for further enhancement. We come up with three layers. It's basically divided into three layers. We have relevant classes from the CityGML that are needed to where our EDO is going to be embedded. So we have basically the abstract building, other core model like the city object and the city object groups. Also some other classes which are going to be relevant as resources for outdoor variables like transportation and land use. Then we take it in consideration in our classification, the needed classes from our EDO, existing EDO. So we were inspired from the existing achievements. For example, we have the noise EDO, which is in its segments road as one of the sources of the outdoor noise EDO noise variables, noise level variables. The other parts here are the other variables that are not integrated within the mentioned CityGML and CityGML EDOs are going to be proposed either as such as EDO elements or attributes or either relationship between these elements. So our whole model is going to be presented based on the assessed value of each variables connected to the property units. That's why we have here basically in the center of our model the proposed unit, which is physically the property unit that can be a flat and which is gonna be connected either to indoor simulation results. So we have here for indoor the simulation or the zone, energetic zone for our simulation based on the energy EDO for assessing the indoor daylight, indoor noise or sound levels, and the indoor airflow, which is natural ventilation. For our outdoors, basically, these variables are connected and assessed at either the opening level or the room level. So these choices in the concepts and in the reflection is based on the variation of each variables depending on where it's directly impacted and where it's directly assessed. So we have here taken an example to clearly define how we tried to define our variables concepts within the model. Taking the example of the sunlight exposures, which is defined as the direct sunlight assessed at the opening level. This variable is not directly assessed. We have from the source to the destination, which is our opening, an obstacles that can be an obstructing building, obstructing vegetation, obstructing shadowing. So we were inspired from the solar rights model, which is not yet an ADO, to try to come up with the concepts of the barriers that are gonna either change the value of the assessed variable. So yeah, here our reflection is trying to benefit from the existing models and to try to rethink in the discussion panel how we could be, how these two models could be connected to try to also see in which way the current proposed model could also be beneficial for the next upcoming enhancement for the LADM-Valuation Information Model. So we come up to the next level. For referring to the tasks presented at the presentation, we are at the modeling stage. We are trying to develop the model, but we still have to tackle the data integration parts. We also want to have some feedback discussions about the IFC BIM integration model, especially for the simulation results data integration. We still have to also validate the model based on some implementation phase and tests for some variables. And which is currently also prepared is two relevant next publication based on the first steps and the second steps for the first outcomes of the model. So thank you for your attention, and I'm gonna be happy to discuss and to have, if you have any questions, of course.
Siham, thank you very much, and I will give you at least an applause. And you see the others applauding also, so very good, well done. Yeah, it's now time for questions. Are there any questions? Is there any? Otherwise, I will start with a question. Yeah, you also already mentioned the assessment of the valuation model. Do you have any idea how you would do that? So if you have the inclusion of the 3D model, if you would include it in your valuation, or if you would not include that, what kind of differences do you expect? There's a practice today of the valuation where people do evaluate without a 3D model. And there is the future where we think 3D is a good aspect of being included. How would you validate that?
Okay, if I understand that the question is basically on the upcoming enhancements based on the integration of the 3D dimension in property evaluation. So I think that the last research that has been carried out has been studying the operability and taking in consideration the relevance of the third dimension, because these variables integrated in the valuation model are basically diffused and disposed in three dimensions. And there has been also some interviews for the local experts and real estate valuers and different stakeholders, which concluded as the need to rethink the current approaches to be enhanced into some sustainable property valuation approach. So when it comes to the practical approach, I think this is the present, and we are not talking about the future. But yeah, I hope I understood all the sections of the questions.
Yeah, so valuation is also happening today, and perhaps people do not have all this information. And yeah, somehow I think in a tall building, the apartments at the higher floors are having a higher value because of nicer views, and that is already without using any real 3D model. So valuation industry is already taking that into account somehow, this third dimension, without the geometry, just by looking at sale prices of, say, the apartments at the different floors. And they look for comparable apartments and then the sales statistics, and they say, okay, in the valuation we give for the different floor apparently a different value without knowing perhaps the 3D model. So this is reality today, and could this be improved? Because evaluation is estimating, is making an assumption based on background information, and people have to pay taxes based on the value. And only when a property is sold, you know the real value or the actual market value. So including a 3D model, will that increase the accuracy of the valuation? Do you expect that? And how will you test that? How will you assess that?
Mm-hmm. So basically, our approach is focused on the technical assessment of the 3D variables. So and the whole image is that at the implementation phase, these variables and these 3D variables are going to be implemented into the statistical hedonical, for example, or regression model, where these variables, depending on their weights, on their contributions, and their impact to the property value within different floor level. So here we're trying to show up, so at the design phase, not either at the existing parts of the building, we can assess this value based on the weight of these inclusive variables, not only taking in consideration one substantial variable. So this is like not changing the current practices, because when it comes to taxations, this is not the way that it's used for assessing. It's a part of the approach. But when it comes to other stakeholders, we have in the for assessing the value, not only the taxations parts, we have the real estate valuers. We have also the contractors who want to assess the value before, like at the to make decisions to change some parameters at the property units, based on cost material, on the internal energy variables and efficiency performance. So that's, yeah.
Okay. Are there other questions? I always have more questions. Yeah, Roland?
Yes, Peter. Well, it's not actually a question to Siham, which I have the opportunity to ask her a lot of questions every day. I would like to ask to the audience two things. First of all, creating an ADE in CityGML is new for us. So I wanted to know if some of you have some experiences in that, and if they think that we are going into the right direction. So that's my first, let's say, general question, not to Siam, but to others. And the same way, I don't know if it was clear for all of you, but currently Siam is making the connection between the variables with the CityGML objects, opening and room. And now, considering your experience in valuation, wanted to know what you think about that, and if you maybe you consider other things when you I don't know, in LADM or some, or I mean related to your own experience. That's it.
Okay, yeah, anybody can respond. Yeah, with respect to the ADE, I'm not sure if there is experience. I think in the 3D GeoInfo group, they may have experience because they are working more with CityGML.
And there's also a general documentation, but probably you saw that already from OGC, how to do this. So the more generic, you probably saw that. Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I cannot help you with direct experience of an ADE. And yeah, with respect to the model itself, which ingredients to use. Yeah, there were four main categories: environmental, physical, energy, and locational, if I remember. I miss the category legal. What rights or what restrictions or what responsibilities do apply on a certain location or property. And yeah, that is also the angle from which LADM is approaching it. From yeah, to me the model looks incredibly detailed. So there is a lot of information, and perhaps this information is already there because you created the model anyhow, and then you can reuse it for valuation or taxation purpose. So I was wondering, what does the model bring you? And it's not, the model is the easy part, but collecting the information is then the hard part, because if you make the model, then you have to collect the information and also maintain it for existing properties. You have to update it if there are changes. And then this is quite a hard task for the government, who is responsible for the valuation. And yeah, maybe they are willing to do so if there is good reason for it. So if you can prove that you can do your job better. People do not like to pay tax, but okay, if they pay tax, the condition is that it has to be fair. And if you can prove that the valuation is more fair, and therefore the taxes are more fair because it's more precise, more accurate, and then you have a good reason to do such a amount of work. Yeah, for a property, going to the room and to the building level. I was not, I did not have a good look at the model in detail, but I would think, okay, what are the views? So where are the windows, and what can you see from the windows? What is the view shed, and what is the quality of the view? And what do you see? Is it park, or is it industry, or is it other residential areas? And what is the quality of the view? And for that, yeah, I would think that you would need to know at least the location of windows, or at least the size of rooms which are having a window. Perhaps you don't know, need to know the exact window because that's a detailed geometry. But Siham, is there any location of the view?
Yeah. For the view, it's relevant to assess it from different windows, because we can have two property units within the same floor. So for each window, we're going to assess different view quality, and then it's going to be relevant. For us, the type of views, it's going to be as an attributes at the ADO view elements and the characteristics of the different view. For us, our model is based on the technical modeling aspects. So it can be, and we want it to be generic, because it can be a view quality assessed in field inspection, or it can be assessed by 3D visualization or 3D modeling. But what we want to say, it's a generic modeling for the variables view, which is relevant because we are at the building property units variation, and we are assessing the value of different property units. That's why our approach is focused on the building. I just want to go back to your interesting feedback about the LADM-Valuation Information Model based on the legal and 3D cadastral viewpoints. It's interesting to see how it's been modeled at the taxation model level, which is based on mass appraisal. Yeah, we take in consideration the building points, but we are more considered by a referential, having a zoning part for addressing the taxation value as a basis. But in our model, it can be complementary for some specific cases when we are more interested to have different property value within the same building. So especially in high-rise building. And yeah, it can be complementary maybe at this point. And also I want to come up to the point when you discussed the fact that can we talk about a model which is gonna be enhanced and actualized by the time? For our model, potentially using the BIM not only as a data source, but also for building simulation results, and also for the AFC at the design phase. It's gonna be like historical for the life cycle of the building. So even if you want to assess for the different phases of the building construction or transactions, it's gonna be easy because we stored already the historical basis information based on the BIM input. So
if now look at the diagram you are showing, the UML model. Is it correct that the windows and perhaps the doors are in the box abstract opening?
Yeah, we have at the abstract opening, it can be windows or it can be doors. Yeah.
Yeah, and there you compute the views and the sunlight. And there's the connection to the view quality and the sunlight.
Yeah, exactly. For example, for the noise ADO, we have also noise coming up from the source, which is for transportation segments, road, and assist from the source, which can be reflected and impacted by obstacles and barriers, which can be like, for example, building. And when we have building, we have another segment, which is reflected noise that's gonna be assessed at the room level, because we have the impact of the materials and the aspects of the energetic space of the room.
Yeah. And where is the IFC part in your model? Because you said this is CityGML and the ADEs.
Yeah, exactly. So for our for developing our EDO, we have different phases. Here we presented the proposed model, but we anticipated at the workflow that we're gonna have the other stage after like validating the conceptual specification of the model. We're gonna go to the data integration phases. So here it's like the next phase, where we're gonna see and extract the entities and trying to map from IFC entities and from the BIM simulation results based GBXML, which are, and transform, which are like the relevant entities taking in charge these variables. I'm gonna take an example of the costs property. We have the cost property is based on quantity takeoff. So we have already the AFC value item, the AFC cost item, and we can assess the value of the cost based on the AFC model. So here it's the challenge for the next phase, trying to really resolve this ambitious
Yeah, so your main model is the CityGML model with the ADAs, and then the other models contain data, and you are doing a conversion via model mapping and extracting the relevant pieces of information and putting that in your model. Yeah, clear approach.
We are not tackling the integration. We are tackling the extracting and the mapping.
Yeah. Other questions from the participants?
Mr. Pieper, can I?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. Hello, everybody. It's really a great pleasure to meet you to this seminar, and it's an opportunity to discuss the work of Siham and to share ideas about some relevant questions about property valuation modeling from two perspectives. I really appreciate active work on land administration, because we are working your modeling of valuation based on taxation, and I hope that this seminar will be a good starting point for future collaboration on this field. So thank you for your interest and your participation to this meeting. So I just want to, as I have the same intention and the objective as my friend and colleague Roland. Our objective, because we discussed a lot of ideas about the approach, and we want to know how this approach, because Siham is working on an extension model for CityGML for property valuation. And in general, this is developing extensions is the contribution of working groups which we have having background on valuation and development CityGML extension. And we want to know how this work can be validated as an extension domain in this context of PhD research. And we really rely on your feedback about this, how this this property model can be validated and shared and approved in the context or in a collaborative context where you can participate in this reflections. And the second question, I remember when we discussed, we had some discussion about the level of detail of information to be considered. You are working on property valuation, and when we model this property, a real property value, we should know with which level of detail in terms of variable to be considered. When we talk about sunlight exposure, etc., we should know what really impacts the final real estate value, because Siham is connecting some domain extensions, solar, energy, etc. But it's interesting to know with which degree of details. The third question, which is interesting, because you asked the question about the role of EFC. Just to clarify, because the perspective of the research was about how to integrate CityGML and BIM to have a real estate valuation model. We are not specialists on LADM, but the intention is to model the property based on CityGML as the core model, and the BIM, the AFC, will be a model that should be integrated, because all of the indoor simulations of the value will be done in BIM. No. There is work of data integration that should be done to extract the simulation value to be integrated to the the database that will be implemented to the model. So there are three main questions that we really need some feedback from you to validate the general approach, and maybe to propose some reflections and new ideas about this. Thank you.
Yeah, Rafika, thank you very much. Yeah, we are very interested in collaboration and getting together further than alone. I think, yeah, we have partly the same questions. I remember, perhaps Abdullah Kara can comment on that he also was trying to figure out, okay, what accuracy or what level of detail in the 3D models do I need, and what is the impact on the result. For example, if I have a coarse model, say comparable to 1 to 10,000, or a model which is more detailed, 1 to 1,000 in 3D, what is the effect on computations, on viewshed computations? And the viewshed is then used for the property valuation. Yeah, perhaps Abdullah, you can comment on that question about what detail is needed.
Thank you for your nice presentation. We tested our model, the LADM-Valuation Information Model, for 3D visibility analysis with 3D visibility analysis, and we need the window sizes, the story heights in that application. Actually, the spatial part is that you need the places of the windows, and the story heights is enough for the 3D visibility analysis. But I don't know, do you have any data about, you say you will test your model with the noise data, but I think it's very hard to find data about the noise analysis, 3D noise analysis. I don't know, do you have this data? I also would like to ask a question. What is your real use cases to test your model? For example, you would like to create a mathematical model to test your 3D spatial attributes to model. In your model, you don't have any characteristics about the property valuation related characteristics. Then I think you will think as a separate part from the model, or you will integrate any property valuation related characteristics, for example, assessed value, the value of year, to your model.
Okay, we're getting in a good discussion from a set of 3 questions by Rafika, the response of Abdullah. Back to a question. Was the question clear, Siham?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to answer. I'm gonna start by the end. So
we'll come back to Rafika's other questions later.
Okay. So for our model, as I said, it's focused on the technical variables assessments. So taking in consideration that we have different procedures for valuation prescribed by many standards, we talk about the REX professional methods, but in our approach, it's basically trying to assess these variables, and then it's gonna be, it's not our concerns, it's not our, I can say it's limited to the technical variables. So it may be gonna be another thesis project or another project where this model is gonna be turned out into basically a 3D correlation regression model. It's like, we think it's the most enhanced approach, taking in consideration the variables weights based on the historical data transactions. So we are not into a study case project thesis. It's basically trying to come up with conceptual reflection, rethinking the parameters included into and impacting the property value, which and so significant to the property units as the element flat. So that's gonna lead us to the second questions, basically on the data. For the implementation phase, we're gonna do some tests, and these tests, basically, we're gonna choose some variables and trying to do tests not basically on real data, but just to see the simulation indoors, outdoors, in this inclusive structural approach. So maybe, for example, for the indoor, we're gonna choose the daylight, simulate it, trying to see the assessed value and how far the simulated value is, for example, sustainable and impacting really the property value, and also based on the outdoors for the exposure, sunlight exposure. So I don't know if I really answered the questions in terms of the limitation.
If I try to understand, you say, okay, I'm mainly focusing on the needed information that is described in the model, in the extension of CityGML. That is my main purpose, but it's for valuation, and I want to know, okay, yeah, what is the improvement? So are you really doing property valuation computations based on the model, or are you just focusing on the model itself and doing some kind of analysis based on interviews with experts? Because I'm not, you have guidelines, the RICS, international guidelines, and every country has its own rules and legislation. And in the Netherlands, for example, there are no guidelines on how to do the valuation. It is every municipality may decide on its own method. The only condition is that it should be close to market value. And how you do that, it's up to you. If you involve a wizard, fine. if the wizard can give you good numbers and there are no complaints by the citizens, fine. So there is not a single accepted or prescribed model for doing the property valuation itself. So I'm wondering, is your thesis also about this aspect, doing the computations to get in the end numbers for the value of a property, or is it only about the model, the data, the information in the 3D environment you need, which then can be used by experts to make hopefully better valuations?
Yeah, exactly. Our model is focused on the first part. It's like the modeling the data information based on the 3D variables aspects. I can also add something about the enhancement of the method used in depending on the country profiles. So what make us choose this approach also is because when it comes to the legal cadastral viewpoints, depending on the country profiles, we don't have the same cadastral system. So based on the taxation, for the taxation basis value, but we try to see the valuation approach from like different perspective, saying that the current methods, it can be comparison, it can be cost, it can be income, it can be like different financial methods. But here we are rethinking that for a property unit, it's really an heterogeneous aspects based on the impact of the complex urban environment and the complex indoor attributes. So we can't compare it. It's like different. It's based on the weight of the whole package of indoor outdoors variables impacting. So it's not only, as all said, location, or it can be financial transactions. We are rethinking these aspects. So that's why it's gonna be relevant as a generic model, and it can be personalized, whether it's for the administration viewpoint publicly or for the private sector. That's why we concentrate.
Yeah, I fully agree with what you say, that it's kind of holistic. You have to integrate every aspect, the indoor, the outdoor, environmental, noise, energy use, everything. When I was asking my question, okay, how relevant are the legal aspects? You had environmental, physical, energy, and locational aspect. And I asked, okay, how important are legal aspects about rights, restrictions, responsibilities? Maybe that is not so much a factor for apartments and buildings or condominiums. And so I think the legal aspects, and especially those about what you are allowed to do on the land. Is it agriculture? Is it residential? Is it shopping? That has a big influence on the price of the property. But yeah, for an apartment, that is a kind of different type of valuation than for other properties. And I can imagine that for apartments, it is not so relevant anymore. So with that remark in mind, could you say that your model is mainly focused on the valuation of apartments, of condominiums, or is it also for other?
Exactly, for the residential building property units, and can be apartments.
But in the Netherlands, the majority is not apartments. For example, we have normal houses, like freestanding houses or houses in a row, and they are not apartments.
Yeah.
And there it's very important, if you are allowed to use more space of your land to build or to build higher, then that is regulated by the rights and the restrictions. And that is the majority of the properties in the Netherlands, the residential properties. And it's not the apartments. Okay, there are also a lot of apartments, but majority is other types of housing. But are you also focusing on the other types of housing? Because
no, especially apartments based on building as like a property units building focused on the apartment level. So that's our
yeah. I'm not sure if we are discussing Rafika's questions very well, but when I talk to the person in the Netherlands responsible at the Ministry of Finance, who's responsible for the valuation, who has to make these guidelines, and I was asking about 3D, he was kind of okay, skeptical. He said, okay, don't care so much as long as the value is okay. But we would like to use 3D for the dissemination of the value. So to make public what are the values, because the fact that the citizens believe that it is fair is also related to being transparent. And so there is this system which everybody in the Netherlands can access to see the value of a property and the value of the neighbor property and the value in another city. And that is based on a map. It's a map-based GIS system, you could say. But it is only showing very well the normal properties and not in the high-rise buildings. And to show the value in apartment complexes, they had interest in 3D, and that was their main interest in 3D. And so as a kind of dissemination tool to show the value once it has been established. Don't know how it has been established. It has been established. It has been decided. You have to pay taxes based on that value, and to be able for a citizen to check if the value is fair. You want to see it. You want to compare it to previous years. You want to compare it to similar properties and to see is my value, not too high, because I don't like to pay too much tax. They have this dissemination platform. Would you think your model is suitable for that? That you have a value of a property, and the only purpose is then to disseminate the value to the bigger audience?
Can I answer just to discuss this question? It's very interesting, the dissemination level, as the citizen can have a model which can calculate the value for transparency, to know etc. But I think it's not an immediate objective of the research of Siham, because Siham is focusing on modeling the value, taking into account relevant variables for real estate valuation. And this model can be implemented in several variants, as it can be used by the public administration, by citizens and other stakeholders of real estate. But dissemination, I think we are not at this level, because it's supposed that we have a regression model that can be used to calculate the final value. For example, by using the hedonic method and the regression model, and it requires taking into account historic transaction. For example, for a case study, we should make some surveys, taking a case study to know how the final value should be calculated. And it's not the scope of this research. I think we are just working on how this valuation can be modeled, and it can be a perspective of the research. Siham should show as an interesting aspect of her research, to show how this model can be used and implemented to respond to this challenging objective of dissemination and transparency in real estate valuation.
Yeah, so clear. The dissemination is not in the scope of the thesis. I have one last question, and we are running a bit out of time. Is it possible to give a demo of the 3D database or the city database to show an example? Xiao?
What? Didn't
Is it
hear.
possible to give a demonstration or to show the city database? Or is it, did you collect data for it?
No, as I said, this is like the third research task. So here, as I said, we are at the level of towards developing the model. So at this stage, it's gonna be like the next phase of the doing the simulation and storing, implementing into the 3D database. So that's gonna be also an aspect which is a challenge to also discuss the integration and the extraction of the IFC and GBXML's entities into our database.
Okay,
So
yeah.
the next, yeah.
Until now, it's a paper exercise, more or less.
Yeah. So.
Okay, yeah, we have still a few minutes left for last questions. And yeah, I'm not sure if we addressed the questions of Rafika well enough. And so for sure, we are open to valuation collaborations from the different angles. What I can say about the model prepared by Abdullah Kara, that will be proposed to ISO for international standardization, and we are looking forward to the feedback of countries. Yeah, because evaluation is such a holistic task, and many factors have an influence, and the question is, okay, what information then to collect, because information collection and maintenance is also costly. Is it still useful? And I think the goal of the valuation model of LADM is not to be the input data for valuation, but to be the output model of valuation. So where the valuation results can be stored. So that's the other side. I'm not sure if that is a correct perspective. Abdullah, what do you think? Or do you think the valuation model in LADM is also intended to be the input of the computations, the regression models or other computation models?
Yes, it can be integrated. They have several characteristics that we don't think when we model the LADM-Valuation Information Model. For example, we don't have the characteristics sunlight duration in our model. I don't know if it really affects the value of a property or not, but an integration can be good.
Yeah, but perhaps what I was intending to say is more the LADM valuation model is more the storing the result of valuation. So yes, the actual values of the properties and their parts and information about the valuation, but it is not the input data for to run valuation computation and to make a valuation for next year and the year after. Perhaps you can do it a little bit by looking by neighbors and previous years, but it's my impression that the LADM valuation model is more to record the valuations. It's more a registration system,
yeah,
in line of the whole LADM philosophy about register the facts, the legal facts, the geometric facts about boundaries. In that sense, not intended to do the valuation itself, the process. Or are there last questions? Do you have an idea what tools to use in the implementation when you are making the next steps? What database will you use? Or
yeah, so for at this stage we are having like many reflections, but basically the potential implementation is going to be based on 3D city database. And we're gonna also focus on the extraction transformation based on the ETL process. And
Do you have an idea what tools to use?
FML?
ETL tools? What tool will you use there? Own software or?
For what? I didn't
For
hear.
the ATL?
Yeah.
What software you will use?
We are thinking, but for example, we have the FML potentially for the part of the transformation. So because we don't need, as like the GeoBIM integration, we need just some entities to be relevant to our variables. So the challenge is especially for the IFC and also for the GBXML results simulation, which is like not as mature in the research area of, yeah.
And for the interaction with the model, how to?
It's also for, as a data source, also for our indoor daylight noise, like the sound level for indoor and the natural ventilation for indoor, which is lately based on last thesis, I think, for the University of Twente, and we're discussing also for 3D modeling aspects and doing some interviews into the field of contractors and real estate valuers, and showing the interest of these parameters indoors and outdoors, especially this inclusive also idea, just in the discussion and for futures recommendation.
Okay, Shyam, I think it's time to conclude. We are already a little bit over time. I would like to thank you very much. And what I will do is, try to put your slides and also the recording online, so everybody that missed the session today can look at it later on. It was great to have your supervisors, Rafika and Roland, also present in this online seminar. And also Abdullah Kara and of course all other participants from the TU Delft. I'm sure we will continue the collaboration. It's a complex field, and there are many challenges ahead, and both conceptual, technical, legal challenges, so really a complex domain to work in. For now, I wish you good luck, and I would really like to thank everybody for attending, participating in the seminar. I will now stop the recording, and hopefully I will send you an email when the